Hello and welcome to another episode of How to Grow Your E-commerce Business. I'm here with Reuben from RJM Tax Exemptions, and we are going to talk about everything to do with e-commerce and tax. So, Reuben, tell me about how you got into the tax world, and why did you choose that over being an astronaut or a nuclear physicist?
What a boring question, Trev. To start the poor audience, poor people. I'm so sorry that you have to hear me talk about tax for a brief minute. Very
Tax is
unconventionally.
exciting.
Okay, well, you listen to Trev, everybody, because we're going to have a great show today. So unconventionally, I trained as a physiotherapist. Was my first degree and calling, as it were. Then I pivoted into being a science teacher for 5 years, and then I started a global e-commerce tax consultancy out of my bedroom during COVID, and it's done all right. It's done pretty well. So how I fell into it, I started my own e-commerce business about 7 or 8 years ago, and just hit hurdle after hurdle, wall after wall of all the difficulties of trying to sell into the States. Got very frustrated speaking to a lot of the big law firms and accountancy firms who charged me a stupid amount of money, gave me very little helpful information as an international trying to sell into the US. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to give this a go at giving a really good solution for this problem at a really good price. And that's what RJM was born out of.
Mm-hmm. So, what is it? Tell me about what what is the problem you solve?
The problem ultimately can be one of many different things, but typically it's in the region of tax compliance. So when you sell into the States, you've got to be compliant on many different levels. The big one is typically sales tax, because as an online seller, you're selling into every state across the US. So you have different laws and jurisdictions and nexus rules to keep in mind across all of those different states. So that's often the first big hurdle which we give solutions to, but we give lots of others as well, which I'm sure I don't want to give it all away at the start of the call because we'll talk about a few later.
What
But
keeps coming back?
any solution, any problem you have as an international seller when it comes to compliance, we should have a solution for it.
So what are the if you don't, because I used to work as an e-commerce seller as well. What are the if you don't do your tax right, what can happen?
Well, there's so many different taxes in the US that they're ready to come after you for. I'd say, firstly, if you don't file a federal income tax filing to the US, even if you're a non-US seller and you think you're safe abroad, they can fine you $20,000 per year that you don't do it, plus
Yeah.
penalties and fine extra interest and stuff. But sales tax is probably the big one, because if you're doing well and you're making sales into all of these different states and you're not collecting sales tax when you're supposed to, and you get audited or flagged up, you then owe a huge portion of sales tax out of your pocket, out of all of the sales that you've made, out of your gross sales. So say like the sales tax could be 7% of all of the gross sales you've made, which could be like half of your entire profit margin. That's going to
Yeah.
have to come out of your pocket, plus penalties, plus interest. So those are two very common blind spots that people get hit with.
So what are the thresholds of before you have to start thinking about this? At what point does a business have to start thinking about taxes?
Yeah, again, varies from every state to state, but the kind of lowest ones that you see are like 200 transactions
Okay.
into a state in a calendar year in 12 months, or $100,000 worth of sales. But the easier way you can cross a nexus threshold, the easiest way, is if you store products in that state. So if you store even just a single product on the soil of a state where they have sales tax, which is 45 of the states, in say an Amazon FBA warehouse or your own warehouse or a fulfillment center, you have nexus and you need to be collecting sales tax there straight away.
So is it if you're if you're an Amazon seller, right? Does Amazon do this for you, or if you're like a marketplace seller, how does that complicate things?
Well, it uncomplicates things massively because they take responsibility for the collection and the remitting of the sales tax for you.
Yeah.
But issue being, they start filing to the state on your behalf, and they remit the volume of sales that you're making, and basically make the state aware of your presence as a seller. So the issue isn't really when you're selling on marketplace facilitators like Amazon or Walmart, eBay, Etsy. The problem comes when you start selling off those marketplace facilitators, like your own
Mhm.
website, like a Shopify website, WordPress that you've built, because from day one of your first sales on your website, you should be collecting sales tax and remitting it if you've stored products in Amazon FBA warehouses in those states, or you've crossed Nexus through the sales of your marketplace facilitators. So it's kind of like you're protected in your marketplace facilitators, but as soon as you start selling off them, all of those marketplace sales count and
Okay.
locations count towards your Nexus and your responsibility.
So I think maybe we've jumped ahead of ourselves a bit here. What is it? Tell me about the
Well, it's so exciting, Trevor. I
yeah,
told you
I don't know. I mean,
it's hard to contain ourselves when we're talking about tax.
tell
It's
me
hard
about
to
okay.
reel
So
yourself back in.
what is sales tax to begin with? I don't think
So
we've covered
sales
that yet.
tax, yeah, so it's a tax charged at the point of sale, and it's based on the location in which the product or service in some cases is delivered to. It's not based on your location, it's based on the ultimate end destination of the product where it's being purchased or sent. And
Okay.
that can be literally down to the state, but also the county and the city. There's over 12,000 different jurisdictions of sales tax percentages across the US, across all of the states, according to their different locations. Um, and sales tax is just the privilege we get to pay for selling products to various people.
Okay. So it's the kind of US version of VAT, is it? But much more complicated.
Very much so. Yeah, it's exactly like that, but you said it right. 1,000 times more complicated.
So is it one of those things? It's a bit like, because I run an Amazon agency, and in some ways I'd like Amazon to be less complicated. But if they were less complicated, then no one would need me. So
Yeah, that's it. That's it. That's why we're in business, Trev. Yeah, you've said it.
if everything was easy, then we wouldn't need us. So is it mainly sales tax that you deal with, or do you deal with other business taxes and processes?
Yeah, I'd say sales tax is the main one that we work with across all of our domestic clients and international clients. We work with people all over the world, loads of US based people, as you can imagine, but people in all different countries. So sales tax has a very broad reach, but I would say our kind of next most common service is for our international sellers, because obviously it's complicated for them to realize how to structure their business or whether they should be filing or not to the IRS, a federal income tax filing, what that looks like, should they be paying tax to the US or not. So that would be our kind of next most common solution that we offer to people.
Okay. So how does it work when so do you have like an app or something that integrates with people's Shopify, Amazon, etc., that pulls out the data?
We do, yeah. So we have our own software that plugs into Amazon and plugs into Shopify and pulls the data. We're in the process of getting it to work with other platforms as well. So we're developing the API. But in all honesty, Shopify in particular, their back office now of how they crunch the data and how they can have the tax settings to collect the tax for you and trace things is really excellent. So we can often just get user permission to people's Shopify stores and access the data that way. But if we're obviously collecting people's data who sell across multiple platforms, we can collate it with our software. But we pride ourselves as a company of offering like a personalized solution for every single business. So we have some businesses that sell across multiple physical stores as well as online stores, and then multiple different platforms and wholesale. So we cover a plethora of different setups and structures as well.
So how do you actually do you charge for this service then? Is it just a number of
It's not a
transactions?
charity. It's not a charity, Trevor. We charge for it. We've got to make a living. Typically, with sales tax, we have a very simple price format, which is I like to think the most competitive in the industry. We typically just charge $40 per filing. We don't
Mhm.
charge setup fees, maintenance fees, software fees, ongoing fees. We don't lock people into large contracts. So I think that's what separates us, makes us quite original from the sales tax point of view. And then when it comes to company structure and federal filings, that's obviously more of a case by case basis and how people want their business to be structured.
So how many filings would a company, if I was selling in the States, how many filings would I, I was doing decent volumes, how many filings would I be doing?
Yeah, so decent volumes you'll be filing typically monthly or quarterly into a state, and again that will depend on the volume and the state itself. If you were filing, let me give you an example. If you were going to file to like every state, that requires filing, that's 45 states. And if you were filing fairly like a decent volume, but like monthly and quarterly mixed between that, you'd only really be paying, I'd say, $1,200 ish a month to cover all of your filings. And
Okay.
at that point, as a large business, it's a fairly reasonable amount to cover 45 states worth of kind of coverage and filing, I guess.
Okay. So what if people don't do this? What have you? How have you? Seen how have people become unstuck with not doing this? Because I don't think I did this when I was selling into the States.
Yeah, so it's all about your kind of exposure. I mentioned Amazon file to states, so you get kind of flagged up in front of the states and made aware to them that you are a seller and what you're doing a lot of the time. Um, Obviously, if you're storing in warehouses and physical locations, that can flag you as well. Marketplace facilitators submit 1099-K forms to the IRS as well, so the IRS will see your gross sales. So that can also be flagged up, and that can be shared with states, but also the IRS as far as filings go. So people get caught in a multitude of ways, but when they do get caught, sales tax is pretty grim when people do get caught because, as I mentioned, a successful business could have done 1 million in sales in a year easily,
Mhm.
and they could owe an average of 7% sales tax on their gross
Okay, so you got
sales. So
quite a lot of tax.
70,000 just out of their pocket, and as I say, that can be then chased up on interest for the time that they didn't pay it, and then also penalties. We work with a lot of clients who come to us with these kind of setups and issues, as you can imagine. And our best solutions for these are typically what's called voluntary disclosure agreements, where you have like an anonymous submission stage with a state that we would do on behalf of the client, and we would try and negotiate with them to set up like payment plans to pay the sales tax back gradually so it doesn't hit their business too hard, to try and get them to take the penalties off wherever possible. And in some cases where people haven't, had clients who haven't collected sales tax for nearly 10 years of doing a business and um, owe a crazy amount of sales tax. A lot of the states, they are very lenient as far as giving you like a look back period agreement shortening. So if you do a VDA, say in that position, you can then just pay back 3 years or 4 years of the tax instead
Mhm.
of the 10 years if you come forward and do it. But if you get caught first for an audit, there's no lenience and you're
So
really going to be in trouble.
was it
Yeah.
saying that was it something about death and taxes?
Yeah, the
Uh,
only two things that are certain in this world
yeah,
is taxes
death
and
and
death. Yeah,
taxes.
yeah,
So tell
that's
me then,
right.
so if I was thinking, okay, so I'm a e-commerce seller and I want to sell into the States. What, in terms of company structure and tax setup, what do I need to be thinking about?
Yeah, so I think you probably want to firstly look at the tax treaty that your country has with the US, because that's going to be one of your biggest points of protection. Because a lot of tax treaties with the US will allow you to function as an Amazon FBA seller who stores products in warehouses, has some presence within the US of some description, makes sales to the US, but still doesn't have to pay any tax to the US. Whereas if you don't, even just having products in a warehouse can be enough to make you have to pay tax. Um, and you've got to look as well carefully of like in some cases of like having returns come back into the US and reselling them can flag things. So I'd say look at your tax treaty first and foremost. We help clients do that as well. And as you can imagine, we've worked with a lot of different countries and had a lot of experience with that. And then secondly, I would say the structure of your entity. So if you're just going to sell as a foreign company, or say a US LLC owned by a foreign company, they're typically treated the same. That's just a foreign owned disregarded entity. If it's a US company like an LLC versus a foreign corporation, the difference comes if you want to form like an actual US corporation, because then at that point you will have to pay US corporation tax. Um, and you can write that off against your costs in a lot of cases to your home tax that you pay. But then you've
Yeah.
started to create a US entity where you are now sourcing income from a US entity, which can make you have to then pay withholding tax and all other kinds of things. So that would be like your second thing to look at. So firstly, tax treaty, as I said, and then secondly, making sure if you don't want to at least not to form a full US corporation, and to kind of keep it behind that level. So those are your first two main things to look at,
Yeah.
as an international, I would say. And then obviously your physical presence, that you're not overly exposing yourself, having employees in the US when you don't need to, having dependent agents over there signing contracts for you when you don't need to, physical buildings and all sorts, because that can then give you exposure which you don't necessarily need.
So would you say that, okay, if I was interested, is it better to start off as just a kind of FBA seller then, or just a marketplace seller? Because then you're right in saying that under most circumstances you wouldn't be liable. They'd pay for you.
Yeah, so our FBA clients, that we work with, we have a bit of a range of what we do for them. Reason being, there is a slight grey area. We've talked about Amazon collecting and remitting the sales tax for you in every state, which is true. But there are some states, because we've spoken to all of them, there's some states that would still say, if you're doing it completely by the book, we still want you to register to our sales tax um, department, and we want you to do a filing and let us know that the filings that you're doing match with what Amazon are telling us, and then just claim a deduction so you don't pay the tax because Amazon have already done it. So if you're
Yeah.
being whiter than white, you'd be registered in about 10 of those states doing those filings, which we do for some of our clients. A lot of people would say, well, they're getting paid their tax, so they're not going to chase me up. It's not an issue. So yes, in that point, if you're in that position, you're in a very safe place still, generally speaking. But you've got to realize that if you're storing products in FBA warehouses on US soil, you should be doing a federal income tax filing to the US. And that is a big blind spot for international sellers, particularly who are
Hmm.
listening today. They think, I'm safe internationally. I don't need to pay US tax, so I don't need to do a filing. But actually it's the opposite. If you don't need to pay US tax, you need to do a filing telling the IRS that you don't need to and why, and submitting your protection under your tax treaty of your country. So you are actually protected if they ever were to audit you and come back to you. So you weren't going to have any problems or be fined in the future. So that's a big blind spot as well.
So would you say, okay, because my head is slightly spinning at this point. Um,
Me too, but that's just the
what
whiskey I had for lunch.
what is the you know um, should people do you if someone comes to you, would you would you advise them on, I would say, do you do like a kind of an audit where you'd say to people, oh, these are the kind of things you have to think about,
I'd
or
advise them to have a stiff shot of an espresso so they don't fall asleep. And then I would get them to look over their data with me. Yes, you're exactly right. So we typically offer free tax liability assessments for
yeah,
businesses, should I say. So we would speak to them, we'd look at the data and we'd say, do you have any blind spots where you should be registered to sales tax, where you're going to really be in trouble if you get caught? Should you be doing a federal income tax filing? We would do a check for people for free. And that's the free consultations that people would find on our website that they can book. And if they've stayed awake through the duration of that call, they will have found some value in it and they will be in a safer place as
okay.
a business.
So how do people find you online if they need to?
So if you search best sales tax company in the world, we probably won't come up because SEO is difficult. But if you search RJM Tax Exemption, we will show up. RJMTaxExemption.com is our website. And I do believe we're the best US tax consultancy in the world because we have the highest ratings on Trustpilot in the world for what we do.
Okay.
And we offer the most competitive prices. So have a look at our reviews, 4.9 on Trustpilot, pretty much all 5 stars. There's the odd, maybe 4 star that comes in that has me, rocking in the shower from time to time. But generally I try to ignore those reviews because they're mainly 5 star. So that's the best place to find us.
Great. And okay, well that's cool. I'll obviously put a link in the show notes as well. I've got a final question for you. I like to ask people like a fluffy question at the end. What's inspired you recently? What do you do when you're not thinking about tax?
Love a good bit of fluff. Yeah, so I've just had a baby recently. I've got my 9-month-old
Quite
little
young.
lad. He's a legend. Apart from when he's screaming at night, keeping me awake. So he's obviously a big inspiration, motivation. Makes you look at life very differently. I think it makes you want to go the extra mile with integrity and doing the right thing. And
You find it more tolerant? I mean, because I find that having had kids, because my kids are now like 18, I when I'm on a plane. and some kids screaming, I thought, "Oh, that used to be me." And it still annoys me, but I'm a little bit like,
Yeah, yeah. Well, to be honest, I don't wanna, like, blow my own trumpet per se, but I feel like I was always fairly tolerant because I have a lot of kids in the family. My brother has 3 kids, had them fairly young. I've done a lot of youth work and kids work, like voluntary
yeah.
work.
Being a teacher, you've
Um,
got to be tolerant being a
I've been a
teacher, haven't you?
teacher in a really rough area in Yorkshire, in England. For those who've seen Educating Yorkshire, the TV programme. So I think that's probably where the tolerance has come from. But yeah, I'm sure there's always an extra level to go to. And I think it's probably more like I'm thinking, geez, my parents, how did they do what they did? How did my brother do what he did with 3 kids? Because I just have 1 at the moment. So that's a big inspiration. Um, Besides that, what else? Morgan Housel, he has a great book, The Art of Spending Money.
Oh,
It's
do you know, I've read that.
amazing.
It's really good. That was a really good book. And the other one, The
Yeah,
Psychology of Money, is also really good.
Psychology of Money, just read both of those.
Very
Those
sensible,
were
very
really great.
sensible.
Yeah, because we can chat as business owners, e-commerce owners of how we make money, have a better business till the cows come home. But actually, the psychology of learning to be content with what you have, learning to use your money in a way where you breed
Yes.
contentment and not just chasing after more. That led me into starting to read the book as well, Dopamine, the Molecule of More, which is all about dopamine and you chasing this just next thing and expectation and how to try and curve that. So I'm at that at the moment, which yeah, it's really interesting
Yeah,
and
I thought
motivating
his
to
books were really good. I mean, it's similar things that to what I've read before, but it was good, very well argued. And I thought that his just money is a tool to make your life better. I
yeah,
thought that was a
yeah, yeah,
quite, because some people don't spend enough money,
yeah,
and people spend too much money. There's a guy who did a book, and I think it's got a YouTube channel and a Netflix documentary called "I Will Make You Rich," which is actually an awful lot more sensible than you might imagine. And his
yeah,
point, I mean, a lot of it is really, spend money on the things you value, right?
yeah,
If you don't like cars, don't buy an expensive car that you have to pay off.
yeah,
Mm,
yeah, yeah.
don't spend money on the things you value. Don't spend, save a lot. Think about what your priorities are, because I think there's an awful lot of, people spend a lot of money on things they don't really need. And, you know,
Agreed. Yeah, I think delayed gratification is a huge one in this space as well. So you look forward to things more. I think you've said getting your money to work for you is a big thing. I think most things can do that for you in life. I think you can be a slave to most things, or those things can serve you. And my iPhone is the prime example of that. And I know a lot of people listening will be straight away like, "Oh, yeah, Ruben, I get you." And I've just downloaded an app recently called Brick, which has a separate device. I don't know if you've heard of that, Trevor. Have you seen Brick before?
I've heard of it, I think, yeah.
So it's a little physical device you actually scan on the RFID top of your iPhone, and it locks your phone, and you can choose for all of the apps for it to lock specifically, like internet, emails, Facebook, whatever. And if you have it on like the serious setting, once you lock it, you can't delete apps, you can't download apps, you can't delete the app off your phone to get out of it. There's no way out of unlocking your phone unless you physically scan it on this device, which you can give to your most beloved to hide for you, or you can hike up a mountain and hide it under a rock somewhere where you know you'd have to go up to unlock it. But that's done wonders for me. Like now, my iPhone is just locked out of all like any app that can send me down a rabbit hole or genuinely distract me. I'm locked out of it. So I have to sit down and open my MacBook now to be in that realm. It's a very different feeling because I'm not carrying my MacBook around with me attached to my hip. And then I might have a brick maybe on my exercise bike if I know I'm going to work and do that at the same time. I'll unlock my phone and do it. But when I go back into normal life, it's locked me out
Okay.
of everything.
Pretty
So
nice. Check
I
it out.
started off with like a burner phone, like an old Nokia 3310 style, which I used for like nearly a year. And I thought, it's not the right balance. It's not serving me, and life's actually quite inconvenient using a phone that clunky. So this is actually a really good balance where you have loads of useful apps still on your phone, but no real distracting ones.
So what I do, I turn off all notifications, so I don't get WhatsApp, email, no notifications on my phone. so it doesn't bother
I'm
me.
just too much of a junkie. Like, for me, if I have any opportunity to click on something, I will just do it. Like, anyway, unless if I have to climb up a hill and scan the thing. That's like saying to an alcoholic, just go walk around with a tiny bit of whiskey in a glass. You're not gonna touch it 'cause no, it's tie it, put it in a bottle and screw the cap on really tight and carry it around with you. You're not gonna drink it, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
No, serious iPhone problem, serious addiction. You gotta
Okay.
ruthlessly
But you
eliminate.
got it. It's certainly, I'm glad you seem to have a certain amount of self-awareness, so that's good.
So much, yeah.
Reuben, it's been great to chat. Remind us again what the URL of your website is.
So RJM Romeo Juliet Mike taxexemption.com. Anyone listening would love to hop on a free consultation and call with you. Nothing salesy, nothing overly dramatic, but just to see if your business is in the right place and protected. But yeah, thank you so much for long suffering and bearing the tax
Hey, do you know,
conversation.
I found
And
it
thanks.
I think tax is actually pretty exciting, so
Well, you heard it from Trev, everyone, today. So you listen to
thank you
him
very
and
much.
get on over to RJM. We're ready for you.
Toodle
You
pip,
take care, Trev.
Reuben. Cheers, bye.
See you later.